Right now, joining us now, Dr. Dave Brat, Republican Congressman, 7th District of Virginia. For those in our national audience, that is in the central part of Virginia around Richmond. Congressman, good to have you with us, man.
Hey, great to be on, John.
All right, so here's the good news. We have a Supreme Court justice getting sworn in today. One of the cornerstones of President Trump's campaign promises, although Mitch McConnell had to go to the nuclear option. But, Dave, you must be fired up because you, for one, have been saying we need to get rid of that whole 60-vote cloture rule anyway, right?
Yeah, well, and I hope we go further on that because that was the big wedge on health care and trying to get health care right as well. And so now they've done it on appointments, and then they did it on the Supreme Court. And so now we'll see if we can get to legislation. And we all know, unfortunately, the Republicans always play by the rules, right? And then it's always the Democrats who violate the rule. And so in this case, a few years ago, it was Schumer who broke the rule and set us on this path. And so it's important that we do remember who kind of violates the spirit of these rules as we go forward.
Oh, you're absolutely right about that. And as we've said many times, the whole 60-vote legislation cloture rule is just man-made, right? That's nowhere in the Constitution. That's basically made up by the Senate Rules Committee. And it's been our belief that both sides want it because it protects the minority when they get out of power. But the other thing is there's a lot of times they never have to come down on either side of an issue. So in our minds, that's like the Incumbency Protection Act, Congressman.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And when it comes to the health care bill, that was the problem, right? We wanted to get rid of the insurance regulation and bring down the price. And we were told initially, and this is crucial to the debate over health care, we were told initially, you can't put any of the regulations into the bill itself. And then by the end, of course, we're finding out when President Trump gets in the middle and starts negotiating and banging some heads, you didn't put some of these regulations in the bill itself, right? So it took Trump to break through the Washington swamp on those issues, and we found out we could. And so now we're still at a crossroads because I think some in the Senate don't want to vote on it, and some in the House don't want to vote on repealing Obamacare, which is what we promised the voters we would do. So that's where we stand.
No, you're 100% correct there. Okay, let's move to foreign policy. After we were at your breakfast on Wednesday, by the way, great turnout, Congressman. You got to be excited about that. Your breakfast Wednesday morning at the Marriott in Richmond, 250 people, right? Sold out.
Yeah, 550.
I mean, 550
there. Yeah,
550.
It was jammed.
550 people sold out, and what an event that was. You got to be excited about that. No question about it. And thanks for allowing us to be in that mix. We certainly enjoyed that on Wednesday. So we had you on Wednesday. Then the day later, President Trump firing 59 Tomahawk missiles at a Syrian air base, giving the Russians an hour notice in order to get out of there so this thing didn't get escalated, measured response. Here's what I want to get your reaction to. Two things. Number one, do you think that was the right thing to do? And secondly, a lot of Trump's base is getting very wary now that the neocons have now infiltrated the White House staff and the National Security Council. We got Rex Tillerson talking about building international coalitions. We had McCain Sunday talk about sending troops there. I believe that would break a key promise that Trump made to keep us out of these wars. What is your take, sir, on the whole situation?
Yeah, well, two very separate questions. On the first one, I think it was the right move. I mean, if you do not respond to the gassing of innocent civilians, children, and babies, as the president put it, then that shows you America is leading from behind again. And so you can't be there. So we have to step out, do the right thing when the obvious calls. And it's not like we're at war, and it's not like we're doing regime change yet. And we don't want to get there. But on the other hand, if you don't go in and set where the lines are, and he did, right? So President Trump deserves tremendous credit because it does take it does take guts to go in. When you said America first and said, "Hey, I'm not going to get involved in these things," it takes guts to veer away from that kind of promise. But in this case, it was called for. But then on your second issue, yes, there's all sorts of concerns now about the New York wing taking over the White House, and KT McFarland just stepped down from the National Security Council. She came down under Mike Flynn. She was had a great, stellar conservative background, and now she's gone. And so Flynn's gone. And, there's just too many appointments being made that have connections that weren't tied to the campaign promises and to the base. And I'm not sure whether some of them even understand some of the campaign promises and who the base are. And that'll have huge ramifications going forward in 4 years when it's time to run again. We have to maintain that credibility.
Well, Congressman, you're right. And a lot of people that are in there now advising the president have no idea why he won. Most of them didn't think he would win. And to this day, they can't figure it out. Your leader, Paul Ryan, being one of them. So the concern is, look, this president's approval rating is at 35%. You can quibble with the polls and numbers, and maybe it's 38, maybe there's an unseen 5%, but it's well under 50%, no question, right? So, but all he has remaining is his base. That's solid. You lose that, Congressman, this whole thing unravels, and he will lose big in 2020. In fact, I think he would get a primary challenge and be at risk. So why would you alienate your base to this extent? That has to be the hope that he sees that, right?
Yeah, and you can see it on the healthcare experiment. Trump got in the middle, and I think they were a little frustrated, with the Freedom Caucus, et cetera, that we were holding strong to really repealing and bringing down the price of healthcare. But then the New Yorkers get in the middle of things, and they say, well, let's just go work with the Democrats. And then you get all these, signals sent out. We'll just throw huge infrastructure investment in all these more left-leaning, pots of money. And they think, right, this is the huge error. They think it's kind of like doing business in New York. And so Trump was friends with everybody, right? He's friends with Republicans, Democrats, far left in New York doing business. So they think, the Goldman Sachs guys, I don't think Trump thinks this for a minute because he's been on the road for 2 years, and he's become educated about politics. But the other guys have no clue that you don't get to just go do business with the Democrats. We just had a blow-up on the Supreme Court with Senate precedent in place for decades that we just blew up because no Democrats would compromise whatsoever. And these are some Democrats that may lose their seat in the Senate for the vote they just took. And so they're willing to lose their seat rather than compromise with President Trump. And the Goldman Sachs wing doesn't seem to understand that. They think, hey, it's just transactional. We can make some deals with the Democrats, and we'll all get along in the middle. And that is that they have no idea what they're dealing with in politics. In business, some of it may go that way, but not in politics in D.C. right now. And I think they're going to find that going out. Once they go and trying to find the votes on some of these other issues, good luck. And just to clear the air on the health care bill, I just want to make it clear to everybody listening. The House Freedom Caucus got to yes, right? That hasn't been reported at all. But Vice President Pence came over and offered us the ability for states to opt out of the regs. And that's a win-win, right? So then the moderates can do moderate policy in their states. Conservatives can do conservative policy in their states. And we said yes to that deal. And there's all these, Wall Street Journal, false reporting, fake news, that we moved the goalposts, et cetera. And there's a package of policy that gets us to a yes. And so then they go back with that deal, and some of the moderates have a tough time with that package. And for what reasons, I don't know, because that hasn't been reported. But it's just crucial to see that the conservatives have had President Trump's back since the beginning, still do on policy. We're trying to get to yes on everything, including a budget coming up, which is not going to be pretty, and that needs to be reported.
So why would the moderates not be in favor of the Freedom Caucus compromise that Vice President Pence brought to your coalition, basically saying we're going to leave various implementation of certain things up to the states. Therefore, if you're in a very liberal state with a very liberal state legislator, you can go ahead and do whatever you want, right? And if you're not, I mean, you leave it up to the states. How could the centrist in your party object to that?
Yeah, well, I think it's just, the kind of the politics, the crass politics of it all, that if they're seen as voting for something that allows conservative states to do conservative policy, they'll be in trouble. So, it's kind of a double bank shot. We're not even near policy in their own state, and that's part of the problem. Is Obamacare is the one-size-fits-all
right
liberal policy that's in the death spiral right now, right? It's collapsing under its own weight because it's one-size-fits-all for everybody.
Right.
And so the Republican Party, when I ran in Virginia, we had the Republican Creed, right? And there's 6 planks. We believe in free markets. We really do. We don't believe in socialized medicine. We believe in free markets, that's the best way to construct policy going forward. Fiscal responsibility, rule of law, et cetera. And what we need to do is put that out front at the federal level as well and say, hey, Republicans, here's your principles that you run on and that you say you believe in. And one of them is certainly 10th Amendment states' rights, right? Having 50 laboratories of experiments going around so you can find the best policy. And so let the liberal states try Obamacare light, and it'll fail. And then the conservatives can put together high-risk pools and some creative new ways of covering folks with pre-existing conditions, but use the private sector in the insurance market, and you'll get way better outcomes. And I'm itching to have those experiments because that'll be great for this country in the long run.
Look, I think that makes a lot of sense, Congressman, and I'm glad you're getting the word out because the way the mainstream media is positioning this is that Vice President Pence went to your caucus, the Freedom Caucus, had this idea, and you guys said, yeah, but we need more. That's the way it's been positioned. And what you're saying is the exact opposite, right?
Yeah, and Mark Meadows, our chairman, has put this out. He said we may not get every single Freedom Caucus member because we don't tell people how to vote, right? We allow people to vote their conscience in their district. But the vast majority will go yes if we get that states' rights issue in play.
Okay, let's get to Chinese President Xi's trip this past week to Mar-a-Lago with the president. As reported in the Financial Times, we're understanding that China made 2 concessions on trade. I want to get your thoughts on them. I mean, they're not big, but I guess it's a start. They conceded something. Number 1, China allegedly, according to the Financial Times, said they would drop the U.S. ban on U.S. beef, which has been in place since a mad cow disease scare in, get this, 2003. So they had a ban on U.S. beef, so no imports there. They said they're going to reverse that. Also, they said that they'll allow U.S. investors to hold majority stakes in Chinese and securities companies. Obama had talked about that. It went nowhere, but now China's saying they're going to do that. I mean, neither of these things really, except for the beef ban, obviously we can sell more beef to them. That's good for the steer cattle farmers. But neither of these concessions really amount to a hill of beans, right, for jobs?
Well, they're a start, but if you get the Chinese to make immediate changes within a week or 2 window, I think that's pretty significant. And I think that does say there's way more coming. The Chinese foreign policy, I just read Kissinger's book on China a month ago, and I recommend that to everybody. They're strategic long-run players, and so they want to do what's in their best interest, and a lot of it's about harmony and you don't want to put it this way, but saving face, et cetera. So they know they've been over the line, and now we finally have a president who's going to call policy out in public for everybody to see, and they don't want that out there because it doesn't look good. And so I'm pretty optimistic on that front.
All right, well, we also understand, I've heard from some insiders, that the Trump administration is working on an executive order. You might want to check into this the next time you meet with your Freedom Caucus when you guys get back. I've heard inside that the administration is putting together an executive order that would launch investigations into unfair product dumping from foreign companies. an action that could lead to tariffs, which I know we might not be on the same page, but I'm a protectionist and I believe in tariffs, so we can debate that later. But they're going to target steel and aluminum, two products that the Chinese government has dumped in the U.S. in order to put our steel and aluminum companies under. That might be something to take a look at, right?
Yeah, well, and he's got the whole pipeline piece tied into that, too, that the inputs from that are going to be American-made. And so, I mean, he's got some big moves where he's going to test folks across the ocean, see what the response looks like. And he's got some heavy hitters in there who know what they're doing on the economics. The Commerce Department, Wilbur Ross, has been around. And these guys aren't going to get head faked. I mean, they want metrics and outcomes in place where we see achievable objectives over the next year. And if they don't see them, then there's going to be some tougher medicine.
All right. I don't think there's any doubt. And I know you mentioned Wilbur Ross. These guys, these guys are going to look for measurable outcomes. This is not the Obama administration on trade, right? These are some pretty tough guys that, have built companies. And, sometimes the Trump business model in government doesn't always work, but it is going to work on trade. There's no question about it.
Yep.
Plus, the people he's got in there are basically an ideological lockstep with him. They believe in his policies, which I think is very helpful. Now, Congressman, on a future show, we can debate the whole tariff system and border tariff and things like that. But you're in your district today, and I'm not going to have to put you through that with me. So we can do that, Congressman, at a later time, because I'm a protectionist, right?
Yep. Yep. No, hey, we're going to get some good policy through on trade, on the tax front. That's going to be complex, and the heavy hitters are already banging heads up there in D.C. on the tax cuts. So next show we'll cover it all across the board.
All right, good to have you with us, Congressman. If I'm not going to talk to you until next week, you and your family have a very happy Easter, sir. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, happy Easter to everybody out there. Thank you. God bless, John. Thank you.
More information, DaveBrat.com, DaveBrat.com. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. Keep it right here.